Welcome to the Facilitators Deep Dive Podcast, your podcast on your way to facilitation mastery.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're tackling something, well, it might just revolutionize how you think about work, you know?
Yeah.
We're diving deep into Management 3.0, and not just the theory. Like, from Jürgen Appelo's book, we've got company handbooks, articles, even some research on how companies are actually putting this stuff into practice.
Right. Yeah. Seeing how it works in the real world.
And get this, one of the concepts is, like, unlimited vacation time. How does that grab you?
It's definitely attention grabbing, I'll give you that.
Yeah.
But it makes sense, I think, when you kind of zoom out and see the bigger picture. Management 3.0 is really a response to how work itself is changing. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Globalization, remote teams. So many of us doing creative work that's hard to measure. Like, the old ways of managing just don't cut it anymore.
So it's not just a fad, it's like a necessary evolution, huh? I'm even seeing that in how Apello breaks it down. Like Management 1.0, remember that? It was all command and control. Then 2.0 tried to be all like nicer, but the structure, it was still kind of broken. So what makes 3.0 different?
Well, it's about managing the system, not just the people in it, you know?
Right.
Apello uses this really great analogy, a horse and rider.
Oh, I like this one.
Right. So think about yourself as the rider.
Right.
Now, is your horse only moving because it's afraid of the bit?
I see where you're going with this. It's a totally different relationship then, right? You're not forcing movement. It's more like working together, like in sync or something.
Exactly. And that's how Management 3.0 approaches work.
Yeah.
It's like, if your best experiences are all outside work, something's off.
Yeah.
Management 3.0, it wants work to be a source of, like, positive experiences, not just something you endure until Friday.
Oh, tell me about it. Speaking of positive experiences, though, I loved that quote from the book. If your best experiences are all vacations, maybe you shouldn't return to work tomorrow. Kind of makes you think, right?
Yeah.
But how do we actually make work better? Like, where do we even start?
One way is through, consistent recognition and appreciation.
Yeah.
And a tool that Management 3.0 highlights is the Kudo box.
Okay, Kudo box. What's that?
It's about building a culture of appreciation. And it's beautifully simple, really. Anyone can give a kudo to a colleague, right? For a job well done. Could be a note, a small gift, or even a shout out, like on the company platform.
Oh, interesting. So it's not just about hitting targets. It's about acknowledging each other's efforts, huh? I can see that. That could definitely boost morale. But isn't there a risk of it feeling like forced, or insincere?
Yeah, that's where the implementation gets interesting. For a kudo box to really work, it can't be top down. The recognition has to be genuine. It has to come from peers, not just managers trying to check a box.
Okay, so it's about fostering that culture where people genuinely want to celebrate each other. I like that. But moving on from kudos, what about communication in general? We've got all these company handbooks talking about open communication, but how do we make sure that actually happens?
Yeah, well, Management 3.0 recognizes this, right? That communication isn't one size fits all.
Right.
Sometimes you need that, like high bandwidth, face-to-face time. Other times, people need to be heads down and do work. The key is to understand each other's needs and styles.
So how do we figure that out? I mean, sometimes I barely know what my colleagues are like outside of work, let alone their preferred communication style.
That's where personal maps can be helpful.
Okay, personal maps. Now, this sounds interesting.
Yeah, it's about sharing information about yourself.
Yeah.
Beyond just, your job title and all that, what are your interests, your skills, your working style? It helps build understanding, and then it makes it okay to say, hey, I need some quiet time this afternoon to focus, or I brainstorm best when we can all, whiteboard together.
I can see how that would be helpful. But would you be comfortable sharing a personal map?
That's a good question.
Kind of brings up questions about how open and trusting your workplace actually is.
You're right. It's not something you can just implement overnight,
Yeah.
Building that trust is essential.
All right, let's talk about delegation then. I'm always fascinated by how teams can be so much more effective when they have a clear understanding of who's responsible for what, and this delegation board concept from Management 3.0, that seems like such a great tool for that.
It is. It lays out like those key decisions and who has the authority to make them. And it can be used by teams, not just managers. It creates transparency, and then it empowers people to take ownership.
Okay.
But it's important to remember, though, delegation is a spectrum. It's not just black and white.
What do you mean by that?
Well, think back to our horse and rider analogy.
Yeah.
You don't want to hold the reins too tight, but you don't want to just let go entirely either.
Right.
Delegation needs that sweet spot where people feel empowered, but there are still,
Boundaries.
So it's not a set it and forget it kind of thing.
Yeah.
You're constantly adjusting, checking in, making sure it's working for everyone.
Yeah.
This is making me think, what decisions would I put on my delegation board, if I had one? What are the things I'm good at, and what am I better off letting others handle? That's a great question to consider. It helps you identify your strengths
Right.
and areas where others might excel, leading to a more effective and more collaborative team.
Okay, so we've covered how Management 3.0 approaches engagement, communication, delegation. But what about the bigger picture? Does it have anything to say about a company's purpose? Beyond just making a profit?
Absolutely.
Mm.
Management 3.0 emphasizes creating value for all stakeholders, not just shareholders. That's where the concept of a value network comes in.
Value network.
Yeah, it recognizes that a business, it impacts employees, suppliers, the community, even the environment.
So it's not just about serving customers, it's about understanding your impact on the wider world, huh? This reminds me of that story about Hair, the Chinese appliance company. They publicly destroyed a bunch of faulty refrigerators.
Oh, yeah.
It was like a statement,
Powerful statement
Oh, but yeah.
about their commitment to quality and customer satisfaction, for sure.
It went beyond just fixing the problem. It demonstrated like a core value. It makes you think about those companies. Whose why really resonates with you? What are their values? What kind of impact are they trying to make?
That's a great question to ponder. What are your non-negotiables?
Right. All right, let's dive into something that can be a bit of a hot button issue. Salary transparency. The Management 3.0 book, it proposes using what's called a salary formula to make compensation more objective and fair. So I'm curious, what are your initial thoughts on that?
Well, it's an interesting idea. It aims to create like a clear, understandable formula for how salaries are determined. So there's no mystery, no suspicion.
Yeah.
But the success of a salary formula really heavily relies on the company's culture and the level of trust among employees.
Yeah, I can see how it could go either way. Some people might be relieved to have that transparency, while others might feel, I don't know, uncomfortable or even exposed. And how do you even begin to create a formula that accounts for all the different factors that contribute to someone's worth?
It's complex, for sure. Some companies, like Fog Creek Software, they've openly published their formula, and they've seen positive results. But for others, it could lead to more conflict and clarity.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all solution, huh? It's about weighing the potential benefits and risks and carefully considering if it aligns with, your company culture and values. It does make you think, though. Would you be comfortable with salary transparency in your own workplace? What are, your concerns or hopes?
That's a fantastic question for all of us to consider, really. It challenges us to examine our own beliefs about compensation and fairness. And it leads perfectly into our next topic, moving beyond, base salaries to how we recognize and reward contributions in a way that actually motivates people.
I'm all ears. From what I've read, Management 3.0 isn't a huge fan of traditional bonuses.
And for good reason. Bonuses can actually backfire. They can create this unhealthy competition, make people feel punished if they don't get them, and they often fail to accurately measure the complexity of creative work,
Yeah, it sounds like it's more about ticking boxes than genuinely recognizing people's contributions. So what's the alternative?
Well, Management 3.0 proposes a more collaborative approach with something called merit money.
Merit money. Okay.
It's a system where colleagues can award each other points. They often call them hugs for effort and results.
Hugs. That sounds a lot friendlier than a cold, hard bonus. But seriously, does that actually work? Are there companies actually doing this?
Absolutely. Muffer, the social media management platform, is a great example. They've implemented merit money, and they've seen really positive results in terms of motivation and collaboration.
I'm trying to picture what it would be like to get those hugs from my colleagues. It does feel like a more personal and meaningful way to acknowledge each other's efforts. But before we get too caught up in hugs, let's pause here for a moment. We've covered a ton of ground in this first part of our deep dive.
We have. We've explored how Management 3.0 tackles engagement, communication, delegation, even touched upon those sensitive topics of, purpose and compensation. And this is just the beginning.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Last time, we left off talking about merit money and how it can be a more positive and collaborative way to reward contributions, compared to those traditional bonuses. But before we go further down that path, I'm curious about how Management 3.0 approaches celebrating wins in general.
Oh, that's a great question. Because celebrating wins, that's crucial for maintaining motivation and morale. But it's not just about, ringing a bell every time someone achieves a goal.
Right.
Management 3.0, it emphasizes the importance of making celebrations meaningful and avoiding them becoming like routine or losing their impact.
So it's not just about the what of the celebration, it's about the how and the why, huh?
Right, exactly.
But how do you make sure the celebration feels authentic, not just like going through the motions, you know what I mean?
Think back to a work celebration. That felt truly special for you. What made it stand out? Was it the way it was done, the reason behind it, or maybe who was involved?
Now that you mention it, the most memorable celebrations, they were always tied to something more than just hitting a target. It was about recognizing the effort, the collaboration, the learning that happened along the way.
Exactly. And Management 3.0 encourages this kind of thinking by emphasizing what they call experimental learning.
Experimental learning.
Yeah, it's about celebrating the process of learning and adapting, not just the end result. It's about embracing both successes and failures as opportunities for growth.
That makes a lot of sense. So it's not just about celebrating. When we reach the destination, right, it's about acknowledging the journey and what we learn along the way.
Precisely. Now, to understand what truly motivates people on those journeys, let's shift gears a bit and talk about the Champ Frogs checklist.
Champ Frogs. Okay, I have to admit the name is super catchy, but what are these Champ Frogs exactly?
Think of them as like the ingredients that make us feel engaged and energized at work. The Champ Frogs checklist, it outlines 10 key motivators.
10? Wow, okay.
Yeah, acceptance, curiosity, freedom, goal, honor, mastery, order, power, relatedness, and status. Each of these, they play a role in how we experience work and what drives us to do our best.
Okay, 10 motivators. That's a lot to unpack. Can you give us like some examples of how these play out in a real work setting?
Absolutely. Take curiosity, for example. Remember that story about the fermented horse milk from the book?
Oh, how could I forget? It was such a surprising and memorable example.
Exactly. It perfectly illustrated how contrast and novelty, they can spark curiosity and make things more engaging. In a work setting, this could mean like encouraging people to explore new ideas, experiment with different approaches, or even just, shake things up once in a while to avoid monotony.
So instead of always sticking to the same routine, we should actively seek out ways to pique our curiosity and keep things fresh.
Exactly. And each of those other 9 motivators, they have their own unique impact on how we approach work. Freedom, for instance. That might mean giving people autonomy over their schedules or how they approach tasks. Mastery could involve providing opportunities for professional development or those challenging assignments that allow people to really hone their skills.
This is making me think, what are my top 3 Champ Frogs motivators? And how might they be different from my colleagues? I could see this leading to some really insightful conversations, and a better understanding of what makes each of us tick.
Absolutely. The Champ Frogs checklist. It's a powerful tool for self-reflection and team building.
Yeah.
By understanding our own motivators and those of our colleagues, we can create a more engaging and fulfilling work environment.
Okay, so we've talked about celebrating wins in a way that promotes growth and understanding individual motivations. But let's circle back to the topic of compensation. I know we touched upon the salary formula earlier, but what are some of the fundamental issues with traditional pay and reward systems that Management 3.0 tries to address?
Yeah, you're right. It's important to understand the problems before we can appreciate the solutions. One major issue is that traditional bonus systems, they often demotivate people rather than inspire them.
Wait, really? How is that possible?
Well, when a bonus becomes expected, it's no longer a motivator, is it? It's just part of the compensation package. And if someone doesn't receive the bonus that they were anticipating, it can feel like a punishment, leading to,
decreased morale and performance. It's like that classic experiment with the monkeys and the grapes. Once they get used to a certain reward, taking it away can be more frustrating than never having received it in the first place.
Exactly. Another issue is that individual rewards, they can actually undermine teamwork and collaboration when people are competing. For a limited pool of bonuses, it creates a culture of every person for themselves rather than working together towards shared goals.
That makes sense. It's like that saying, a rising tide lifts all boats. But when everyone's focused on their own little boat, it's harder to achieve collective success.
Precisely. And finally, traditional bonus systems, they often rely on objective measures that simply can't capture the complexity and the nuance of knowledge work. How do you quantify creativity, problem solving, or the ability to collaborate effectively.
It's like trying to measure a fish's intelligence by its ability to climb a tree. It doesn't make sense.
You got it. And that's why Management 3.0, it advocates for a more holistic approach to compensation. That goes beyond simply rewarding individual outputs.
So what does that look like in practice?
One approach is to, move away from bonuses altogether and focus on creating a compensation system that's based on merit, not just time or output. This means recognizing and rewarding people for their contributions to the team, the organization, and the overall value network.
This sounds a lot like that merit money concept we discussed earlier. It seems like a much more collaborative and positive way to approach compensation.
Exactly. It shifts the focus
from
competition to collaboration and recognizes the value that everyone brings to the table.
Okay, before we move on to part 3, let's take a step back and consider the bigger picture. Why is Management 3.0 so relevant right now? What makes it more than just another, management fad?
Well, it's about adapting to the changing world of work, right? Globalization, flexible work arrangements, the rise of the gig economy, all of these trends, they're challenging traditional management models and demanding a new approach.
So it's not just about tweaking existing systems. It's about fundamentally changing our mindset, about work and how we manage people.
Exactly. Management 3.0, it offers a framework for thinking about work in a more human-centric, adaptable, and collaborative way. It's about empowering people at all levels to take ownership, be creative, and contribute their best work.
And it's about recognizing that work should be a source of meaning and fulfillment, not just a means to an end, right?
Right.
Stay tuned for part 3, where we'll explore even more tools and techniques for becoming a better business transformer, no matter what your role is.
Welcome back to the final part of our Management 3.0 deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground, from rethinking motivation and rewards to understanding what makes people tick with that Champfog's checklist. But I have a feeling we're about to zoom out even further and look at the even bigger picture.
You're absolutely right. We've talked about engaging people, improving processes, but now it's time to consider the impact of a business on the wider world, really. Management 3.0 uses this concept of a value network to describe this. Okay, value network, I'm intrigued. We hear a lot about serving customers, stakeholders, but a value network sounds different. What's the distinction?
It's a shift, I think, from linear thinking to a more holistic view. Imagine like a spider web with connections going in all directions.
Okay.
A value network recognizes that a business, it creates value for its employees, suppliers, customers, investors, the community, even the environment. All these players, they're interconnected. And they impact each other.
So it's not just a chain then, where value flows from point A to point B. It's this dynamic system where everyone is, both contributing and benefiting, huh?
Exactly.
But how do we actually optimize for the whole network, not just individual parts? That feels, really complex.
It is complex, and it requires a shift in mindset from control to collaboration.
Okay.
So instead of trying to, micromanage every aspect of the business, we need to create an environment where everyone can contribute their best work and thrive. This means fostering trust, transparency, and a shared understanding of the overall goals and values.
So we're letting go of the reins a bit, like we discussed with delegation, but on a much larger scale, huh? It's about setting the right conditions for the entire network to flourish.
Exactly. It's about creating a system where individual success is intertwined with the success of the whole network. And this is where all those Management 3.0 practices that we've talked about, engagement, communication, empowerment, they come together to create this thriving ecosystem.
That's a powerful image, a thriving ecosystem. But I have to ask, the practical question, how do we actually put all these Management 3.0 concepts into practice? It can feel kind of overwhelming.
It's true. There's no magic formula or one-size-fits-all approach. But that's actually one of the strengths of Management 3.0. It's a toolkit, not a blueprint.
Oh, I like that.
Right. It's about experimenting, adapting, and finding what works best for your unique context.
So it's about understanding the principles and the tools, and then figuring out how to apply them in a way that makes sense for your specific team, company, or even industry. It's almost like a mindset shift more than just a set of rigid rules.
Exactly. And that's why it's not just for managers,
Right.
Management 3.0 is for anyone who wants to make work a more human and fulfilling experience. It's for team members, leaders, freelancers, entrepreneurs, anyone who wants to contribute to a more collaborative, innovative, and purpose-driven workplace.
It's about taking ownership regardless of your role and finding ways to make work, make work better. For everyone.
I couldn't agree more. It's about recognizing that we all have a role to play in creating a more human-centered and sustainable future of work.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Management 3.0, what's the one key takeaway you want our listeners to leave with?
I'd say Management 3.0 is more than just a set of practices. It's a philosophy, really. It's a way of thinking about work that puts people at the center and empowers them to create a more engaging, fulfilling, and impactful work experience.
It's a vision where work isn't just a means to an end, but a source of meaning, purpose, and even joy.
Precisely. It's about creating a world where work is a force for good, both for individuals and for the wider world.
That's an inspiring thought to end on. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, from the importance of motivation and engagement to the power of delegation and transparency. We've explored tools like the Kudo box, personal maps, the Champ Frogs checklist, and that concept of the value network.
And we've challenged some traditional ideas, right?
Yeah.
About leadership, compensation, and what it means to create a truly successful and sustainable organization.
But most importantly, we've emphasized that Management 3.0 isn't just for managers. It's for everyone. It's for anyone who wants to make work a better place, for themselves and for everyone around them.
So go forth and experiment. Embrace those principles of Management 3.0 and see what works for you. Create a workplace where people thrive, innovation flourishes, and everyone feels valued and empowered.
That's it for our Management 3.0 deep dive. Thanks for joining us on this journey. Keep learning, keep growing, and keep making a difference.
See you next time on the Facilitators Deep Dive Podcast, your podcast on your way to facilitation mastery. Until next time.
See you then.